Modern society is a beast out of control. We have iPhones and genetic engineering, but no healthy food. You can get a sex change, but try getting a glass of milk which does not contain added chemicals. This, of course, is all outlined in the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, a document which uncovered a several hundred-year-old conspiracy by a certain secret group of people, which reached its full apotheosis at the beginning of the early part of the 20th century, and was uncovered by Russian intelligence services, but which have subsequently been discredited by the very same group which it uncovered and which has, since the World Wars, taken complete power. In the Protocols manual, which you can read for yourself and verify its authenticity, which is pretty obvious from the content, which predicts World War I and World War II, and not only predicts it, but predicts the exact mechanism of it, long before both wars even come to fruition. In the Protocols, it discusses how the public mind will be changed to complete non-essentials, away from things that are important, like getting a glass of milk, and onto things that are completely unimportant, like rights for transsexuals. We truly do live in a mental asylum now. But there's more to this than meets the eye. It's not just total insanity, it's organized insanity. Why do you think now that masturbation, coffee, porn, sugar, all these things are so popular? Precisely because they reduce testosterone and increase estrogen. Yes, it is true these things are inherently addictive in and of themselves, but they also serve a social function insofar as they unwittingly medicate us for modern society. They prepare the mind in order to take the subliminal pressures and the oppression of office work and industrialized society. They allow a man to self-medicate in order that he does not become too aggressive or assertive in a harmonious female society. The game is rigged. This is why God the Father is a father, and he is not of the world, and it says that friendship with the world is enmity with God. Civilization is anything but normal. It is highly psychotic, and so renders anyone who does not accord with the public psychosis antipsychotic, that is to say, psychotic for not being psychotic. Does an abused dog hate its owner, or continue to love its owner in a hopeful optimism? Does an abused modern denizen hate post-industrial technocratic society, or does he continue to love it, despite being under severe oppression? Just because we are not aware or conscious of living in extremely hard times does not discount the truth that we are indeed living through a real-life horror show, but like dogs, continue to chase our abusing masters, the money masters, hopefully and optimistically. In the words of John the Baptist, you believe you want for nothing, but you are pitiable and wretched. But nevertheless, we will continue along this course of accepting the crumbs which fall from the table until we are totally under control, giving us toys and media, iPhones, while our freedom is robbed. As Christ himself says, how can a strong man be defeated unless he is first bound? Like a boxer who forces his opponent to give up mid-fight, or like a rapist who intimidates his victim, not even to resist. We are placated until tied up in cords completely. The Bible calls these psycho-spiritual cords strongholds. The name for these is strongholds. Cultural, political, social, technological strongholds, all modalities of spiritual domination. But it is also written that the Word of God is living and active, and has the power to tear down strongholds. The most harrowing of these strongholds is the use of mathematical logic and computer science to control people. This reaches its maybe most interesting ideology, or should I say practical application, in the academic notion of game theory. Game theory and computer logic, the way in which people are treated as computers and controlled under our modern system of government, under our post-industrial system of government, doesn't in fact work on religious people, and in particular Christians, owing to the presupposition of self-interest. All these mathematical game theory problems, psychological predictions from social science, they all necessarily presuppose the agency of actors having individual desires and interests and acting according to rational self-interest. Of course, the cross and the sacrifice of Christ does not accord with this assumption, and this is why religion must be destroyed. Game theory, special relativity, all these things are all these education methodologies. These are just simply academic branding and marketing. You have common branding and marketing for products. Well, guess what? You also have academic branding and marketing, if you didn't already know. This is exactly what top universities are, the university rankings. It's just a collection of luxury branding and marketing, nothing more. When will people wake up to the money imperative? No imagination, people these days. Children now, and even adults now, seem to understand the game when their job is to sell a product. But amazingly, when products of all sorts, be they intellectual or material, are being marketed back to them, people seem to be in a state of disbelief, as if you can sell bullshit to others, but others wouldn't sell bullshit to you. There seems to be a false sense of security. I don't know, maybe it's just narcissism. My own intuition is that this endemic naivety comes from an overprotected childhood. People who grow up within civil society and the rule of law from young do not in general have to think about basic material needs, basic human survival needs, as they are catered for on a very low quality yet fundamental basis. Raising a human being through a school system where the survival instincts of the animal kingdom are negated and neutered through socialization makes people gullible and naive and highly susceptible to manipulation, as they are conditioned without the fundamental fear of danger which animals have, and so trust all information and commands given to them without question. In short, we have been entirely domesticated. A domesticated dog will accept an unlimited, infinite amount of abuse from its owner. A wild animal, on the other hand, instinctively and rightly so, treats all strangers and foreign stimuli as potentially hostile. Do you see now the political motivation for multiculturalism, for equality, for ideologies like these that stop people from self-defense? You seriously expect me to go to bed every night before 12 o'clock, wake up every morning before 7 o'clock, eat my low-quality, genetically modified breakfast, turn up to my meaningless office job, waste the best years of my life in a room sitting in one single position in an office chair at a computer for 8 or so hours every day, and then return home to eat my miserable dinner, watch some YouTube or TV, and then repeat the same thing again every day? If that's not slavery, I don't know what is. People these days will tolerate anything, but I'm not buying it. The Apostle Paul said something to the effect that people slap Christ in the face and yet call him weak. But all the time, they themselves are being slapped in the face and do nothing about it. The Christian, it seems, tolerates physical abuse, but maintains his soul, whereas the average person in postmodern society does not tolerate physical abuse. In fact, physical abuse has nearly been eliminated, totally criminalized. But there is a high level of spiritual abuse, of people being slapped in the face and being made to do things that are not natural, from the time they go to bed until the time they wake up. And for what? Well, principally for 3 reasons. We want people to like us, we want to fit in, we don't want people to hate us, and the average person is so unimaginative and boring that they can't even perceive the possibility of another life alternative. They can't imagine how society could be any other way. So they just go along with it, go with the flow. If I speak of physical things and you don't believe me, How then will you believe me if I speak of spiritual things, as the Gospel states? What it all comes down to is this. Even if some other people can happen to see a glimpse of the truth, they are disgusted by anyone who speaks it publicly, because they perceive you as stupid and socially unastute to do so. Such a designation arises from one who loves their own life, because they are artistically limited and are satisfied with an extremely minimal hand-to-mouth smartphone office job existence. If contrariwise people had even the imagination to perceive the limiting nature of their so-called modern life, the boring and pathetic essence of it would sicken them to the point of rebellion also. As Christ states, whosoever loves his own life will lose it, but whosoever brings his self to naught for my sake will find it. We are the walking dead. No better example than a pop concert with a multitude of retards waving their hands in the air, singing awful songs, pretending to themselves and to their friends to be happy. Maybe one or two of them even are genuinely happy. The old saying goes, little amuses children. Furthermore, the reason why even people who are mathematically brilliant, perhaps indeed especially people who are mathematically brilliant, cannot see the wool which has been pulled over their and society's eyes, is because if we take mathematics as a case in point, it involves a form of reasoning that is overarchingly deductive. You start with axioms, which are assumed true for the purpose of calculation, and then draw the relevant conclusion. In real life, however, what is of greatest importance to truth is not being able to articulate information using logical rules, but more fundamentally, to question the source where the information first came from. All information, in practice and not in theory, is always and often highly politicized. Let's consider the story of the Red Sea, which the Hebrews needed to pass through in order to leave Egypt, in order to escape their captivity. The sea indeed is a metaphor for a spiritual wall. It's not just a physical wall, it's a spiritual wall, which differentiates the Holy Spirit, which comes into Moses and leads his people free, from the spirit of fear, which comes from the established processes of society and rational argument. If people just stuck to empirical truths, logical truths about what they could see, it would be absolutely insane to say, okay, let's keep going, let's proceed through the ocean, since it's impossible for the ocean to part. The underlying meaning of this story is that the truths that matter, the truths that are important, are the things that cannot be perceived deductively, are the things which go beyond the visible sphere, that proceed by faith, and it's only through faith and the Holy Spirit that we can find a way out of the darkness, out of our captivity, and through what would seem an logical impossibility, which is to pass through the ocean. Think about mathematics again. We have the most fundamental principle in the mathematical language, which is the order of operations, that things must be done in a specific order, that addition and subtraction should come only after multiplication and division, for example. Hence, if you're unaware of the higher order, the answer you derive from any calculation, despite much effort and calculation, is always going to be entirely false. Similarly, the controllers of our society hide operations, they hide the higher orders, so that the answers we derive under materialism, under what we can see and under what the information we're given, are both false and incomplete, although they appear complete because the lower orders of operation have been applied to the data only. If you stop for a moment only to consider any leadership position which you've taken in your past, in your life experience, if you're completely honest, one of the first and most natural, and maybe without even thinking, most obvious things that you will do when you assume a leadership position is, if not even just intentionally, but unwittingly, you will hide or disguise certain information to the wider group, because it's not useful or efficient for everybody to know the whole truth about a certain operation, the whole truth about what's going on, because this reduces efficiency, and you may have people disagreeing with the leader's opinion. Why then, for all the more reason, would the people who control us not have great motivation to keep a multitude of facts from our knowing? And so indeed, when we reason with our small-mindedness, we're like the man reasoning with only knowledge of the lower order of operations, but we get the entire formulae and conclusion wrong because we're unaware of the higher orders which behind the scenes are in operation. This of course leads us to the IQ-EQ conspiracy, which are just catchy, simplistic, marketable, mimetic brands which people just sheepishly accept because a word in fact exists for them. Along with the entire psychiatric edifice, these are just ways of further controlling human labour. This is not even really hidden, but rather a truth, spoken euphemism, which I care to elaborate on and put in social context. The function of monopoly capitalism, vis-à-vis postmodern, post-industrial global society, is to consolidate wealth in the hands of an elite few. From the horse's mouth even, there's no even attempt to hide the fact that income inequality is unashamedly acknowledged in the so-called developed world to an increasingly greater extent, day by day. To maximize profit, which is the sole purpose of corporations, is necessary either to pay, one, less labour, or two, replace that labour with computer technology, in other words, automation. Given this economic reality, it proves highly efficient to divide modern labour into two groups of people, the skilled and the unskilled. The skilled can be used for operating the more advanced computer technology, as well as developing new technology to drive up profit. Unskilled can be used to operate the more basic forms of technology, if a computer cannot do it, or if it proves cheaper than using a computer in such circumstances. The entire post-industrial education system is thus less an exercise in finding a well-balanced, insightful, wise and leaderly human being with a moral backbone, and more about screening and conditioning children into one of these two groups for profit-making purposes. Highly analytical computer work thus requires people with IQ, which is not necessarily an index of intelligence, as is widely suggested, but for those with a high IQ, rather, a measure of a radically imbalanced individual who processes information in a manner focused on abstract, narrow-minded problems. The remainder of labour concerns unskilled labour, which, in order to tolerate less pay and more inhumane working conditions, the illusion of honour and intellect must be bestowed upon this condition by creating an environment and a cohort of individuals to work in a single room and small group, euphemistically termed the office, without arguing and without fighting, which would be a natural and even admirable response of a balanced human being, put in conditions with people they don't know too well and set to do tasks which are insanely boring. A normal person would go crazy, but since everybody nowadays is crazy, you can't go crazy if you're already crazy, I suppose. EQ is thus brought in as a grading system to reward those who are radically imbalanced individuals at the other end of the spectrum, from IQ, for performing what to a normal healthy human being would be intolerable conditions, evidenced by the fact that people who spend any amount of time in the office, even less than the average amount, tend to suffer from poor health. This is documented scientific fact. They suffer from poor health compared with previous generations, more cancers, and reduced mental health. Thus we have a ludicrous technocratic society in which severely unhealthy and imbalanced individuals are rewarded for their illness, usually men with IQ and women with EQ, and where the healthy mass of individuals in the middle, or the more healthy mass, who are neither obsessively detailed in their focus towards objects, nor psychotically optimistic and agreeable in spite of the ludicrous exploitation of their labour. These normal people, or more normal people, who have neither a high IQ nor a high EQ, but are just somewhere in the middle, they're normal, or as close to normal they can be. These people are punished for their normalcy and excluded from obtaining decent jobs because they fail to display an intellectual imbalance. I'll say that again. It's not because they display intellectual balance or intellectual prowess. It's because they fail to display an intellectual imbalance on the EQ or the IQ spectrum. In retort to anyone who suggests it is possible to have both a high EQ and a high IQ at the same time, this would indeed be possible, since the linear spectrum idea is merely a metaphor, not a logical condition, so you could in theory have a person like this. But it would be challenging to find many people in this group. If indeed there are high IQ, high EQ people, we could fairly call these individuals psychopaths. Any human labour which rejects the corporate ideology of agreeableness and objects to the exploitation of labour tries to assert themselves. Such people can expect, at very best, to be deemed low on either the EQ or IQ spectrum, and at worst, they could be given a more severe psychiatric diagnosis, such as antisocial personality disorder, which is, analytically speaking, not an illness, a priori, but only a socio-political label for anyone and their behaviour and thinking which threatens the existing establishment of cheap, happy, agreeable and exploited mass labour. A similar label for children, which also profits the pharmaceutical industry, would be ADHD, which in other words is just simply what it is to be a normal child, not wishing to sit like a robot in a seat for hours learning maths and English instead of playing or dreaming. I wish more kids could have ADHD, if ADHD was even a real thing. When we put all the facts about this EQ, IQ nonsense together then, we reach the conclusion that policymakers at the political level, the bureaucrats, are individuals who are agreeable, non-argumentative, and work in detail on particular tasks, rather than questioning the purpose of the task itself. This phenomenon is never more obvious in the case of high-achieving than in the case of high-achieving university students, who believe they are smart on the basis of being able to remember and process vast quantities of data. In fact, the very first question which even an idiot might ask, but which these so-called intellects in Silicon Valley and these academics fail to ask, is the glaringly obvious and most crucial question, which fundamentally is, where did the information which I'm learning come from? Where did it come from? Who paid for it? And isn't it a serious conflict of interest that the patrons of the university are mainly large corporations, or the government, which is itself plutocratically controlled by these corporations? A yet more obvious example, still, is people having political debates based on news items they've received from the mainstream media, people talking politics over dinner. But rather than questioning the reliability of where this information came from, they focus on debating the material given to them. They get caught up in the details. We thus exist in a society of highly functional retards who are able to perform near machine-like tasks with admirable accuracy, and children with the ability to engage in seemingly complex political discussion. But very few persons, if any, with the common sense or philosophical know-how of a well-balanced intellect to simply say or simply ask, why am I wasting my time learning and discussing this when the people who finance my education behind the scenes have a profitable interest in misleading me?